All right. Well, let me just start first by doing what I usually do, which is to let people know what I'm doing and why I'm doing this. So welcome to my AMA session. I do these once a month. It's my way to try to respond and be helpful around career advice, etc., as people are all trying to achieve their aspirations. It's hard for me to do as many one-on-ones as people request, so I try to do it this way because many times you can learn from other people's questions too. So that works out well. So feel free to subscribe to the YouTube channel if you want to be alerted whenever I'm getting ready to do an AMA session. And you can always send in your questions in advance, or you can ask them live in the chat. Either way, happy to do it. Okay, almost set here. Got my questions open. All right, perfect. So let me get started. First, how did you navigate corporate politics? Okay, so corporate politics is an interesting one, right? Because every organization has politics. I honestly believe is once you get more than 3 people in the same operation or together, there's politics. And what is politics? Politics really is just the conversations, the path to power, right? The negotiate, all those things that happen outside of just the traditional, let's get the work done. So it's important to learn how to deal with politics because you're always going to face them. Some companies, it's a key part of how they operate. And some it's not, but it still exists. So it's still important to understand how to deal with it. So how did I deal with it? First of all, stay above the fray. And what I mean by that is at all times, be professional, be kind. You know, so many times what happens is you get involved in the dynamic, the emotion, the excitement, right? There starts as a little bit of gossip and all that kind of thing. Well, when you start to participate in all that and actually take one side versus another, pass on things that you're not quite sure whether it's true or not, but you heard, etc., then you're actually considered to be part of the whole political game. Much better to kind of stay above the fray. So try not to pass things on. Try to be neutral as you're hearing things that are going on, etc. Try not to engage and actually to inflame all those things that are happening that deal with corporate politics. Now, at the same time, you have to be observant. It's really important to understand, even if you're not participating in the politics, you still want to understand what's going on. You know, you need to be observant and pay attention to the informal networks, to where power decisions happen, all those things, because you need to understand that in order for you to be effective at what you're trying to do. And it also helps you to understand relationships that are important to build and to establish. So realize that every organization has politics. Be observant, try to understand how they work so that you can actually use that knowledge to help you get done what you need to get done. But don't become part of the problem. Don't get sucked in to all the different dynamics and things that go on where you're considered a really political person, right? So that is a fine line to walk, but you can do it. I feel very positive that I pretty much was able to do that. So you can. You just have to be very conscious of it. If you find yourself getting pulled in, getting excited, passing, oh, have you heard? Do you know? All those kinds of things. Just step back and remind yourself of what it is you're trying to achieve. Because what you're trying to achieve is a career. You're trying to build a positive reputation. You're trying to accomplish key objectives and responsibilities. That's what's really important. Being the one who knows everything or passes it on, whatever, that doesn't necessarily help you achieve your long-term career objectives. So stay focused on the prize. All right. Any follow-ups, etc., feel free to pop them in the chat. I will be monitoring. Okay, next. How did you stay positive among so much strife, both in workplace and in the world? You know, this is a really good question because you're right. It is so easy to look at everything that's going on around you and just feel depressed, right? And feel challenged and all those kinds of things because there's so much that's out of your control. What I've tried to do is, frankly, to focus on the gratitude side of it and focus on things that I can control. So one is sit back and just reflect on what you have to be thankful for. Because I'll tell you, no matter what's going on around you, there are always things we each have to be thankful for. So get yourself grounded there. If you find yourself swirling around with all the things that are happening outside, take a deep breath and just try to focus on, okay, what am I thankful for? So that you can get that gratitude, right, coming up. And then I find that it's really helpful to me to frankly volunteer. And I don't mean writing a check. You can write a check, but that doesn't give you the same feeling. But actually, physically, personally, volunteering with some group of people, organization, where you get to engage with people who frankly are less fortunate. Again, it helps you remind you what you have to be thankful for, which for me helps me keep that positive attitude. The key is stay focused and help others, but at the same time, you want to plan for tomorrow. So this isn't a matter of, okay, forget everything that's going on and just focus here. I mean, yes, focus on where you're going and what you're trying to achieve for sure. So plan for tomorrow. But what I like to say is live for today. Make sure you're doing things during the course of the day that at least something gives you a tangible, in the moment experience to help, again, ground you from all these things that are going on. The other thing that helps me is giving people the benefit of the doubt. I find that in general, most people aren't out there to hurt other people, cause bad feelings, right? I mean, all of those things. And so that doesn't mean that everybody's super effective on how they communicate and what they say. And it doesn't mean that people are all knowledgeable. So therefore, sometimes people step in the mess, not realizing that they're actually doing it. So I try to start by giving people the doubt, which helps me from getting immediately triggered when things happen. Now, some people do it on purpose, absolutely. But I start first with benefit of the doubt until proven otherwise. And the last thing I do here is I try to focus on something that I can actually do that's positive. We all have power. We all have power in some way, shape, or form, whether it's in our household, in our block, in our neighborhood, in our community, in the organizations in which we're engaged with, right? I mean, if you look broadly, we all have the ability to impact something. So try to impact one thing. All of those things help me stay focused and positive. And the other thing is, I find that being positive is a bit of a choice in that I choose to be happy. I choose to be positive. It doesn't mean that everything is always going well for me, because it's not. If you've read my book, you know it's not and doesn't always. But I do try to be positive thinking versus negative thinking. I just find it helps me reduce my stress. All right. Next question. What are the 3 most important skills to glean upon, even with my advanced age career domain? Okay. Well, frankly, I don't really care how old you are. I personally believe that there are a few skills that everybody needs to have and demonstrate, no matter where they are in their career. And it's certainly what I looked for as a CEO for 15 years. And that is, number 1, communication skills, right? It's really important that you are able to communicate effectively. And when I say communicate, I mean in the broad sense. You need to be able to communicate effectively so people know what you need them to do. People understand what you actually have done, that you're able to persuade, right? All of those things involve communications. You need to be able to inspire and encourage, right? All of those elements. So effective communications in the very broad sense is one of the top skills that I think everybody needs to have, no matter where you are. 2, be a good team player. And a good team player to me is someone that others can count on, right? Someone that others can lean on when they need to, who will be supportive. So being a good team player is really important because, frankly, nothing of significance happens with just one person. One person alone, rarely. You typically need a team, a group, etc., involved and active to actually do something of significance. So being a team player is really important. And 3rd, make and keep commitments. And this one to me is straightforward. Do what you say you're going to do. I mean, it's really straightforward here, but you'd be amazed at how many people actually don't. And so if you're going to do what you say you're going to do, you better keep track of all the commitments you made. so that you know that you're actually getting them done. So those are my top 3. All right, next question. How do you approach the conversation of getting let go from previous roles, especially if the company culture was toxic, but you didn't leave when you should have? Love the advice you gave in the book about leaving when things aren't right. Okay, yeah, and unapologetically ambitious. I talk about these things a lot. So, number 1, be straightforward. When it comes to an interview, I find it's better just to be straightforward. So don't apologize, for stuff that's happened. Bottom line is, for this, it was a toxic culture. You should have left, but you didn't. But ultimately, the company decided it wasn't a fit either. Well, what that means is it wasn't a cultural fit. So just state that. Don't dwell on it. When the recruiter asks, why did you leave such and such? Well, it wasn't a cultural fit. Company realized it, and I realized it. Should I have taken action earlier? Probably. And I've learned from that. Blah, 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 right? Just go through and then pivot. You don't want to spend a lot of time dwelling on that. Then pivot to say, one of the reasons I'm so excited about this company is because of what I understand about the culture and blah, 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 blah. So lead it into the positive of what you're looking forward to versus spending time on the negative aspect. And whatever you do, don't trash the company. Okay? It's not worth trashing the company, because whenever you do that, the company that you're interviewing with thinks, this is probably what they'll say about me when they go on to do something different, right? So, realize that people are listening not just to what you say, but how you say it. Oh, hold on. Oh, I'm currently in Florida, and it's hot and everything's blooming. And allergies have just kicked in. All right. Okay. Sorry about that, people. Let me get a little cough drop going. All right. And again, feel free to drop anything in the chat if you'd like to. All right. So next, whom did you mostly look up to during the whole journey, especially during difficult times? And I'm assuming you mean the career journey. Well, frankly, there really wasn't one person. Let me take this cough drop. Okay. Sorry about that, everybody. I apologize. All right. There really wasn't one person throughout my career. As I changed jobs, as I changed companies, and even as I changed locations, I actually watched different people. And to me, that was more of what was required, was really paying attention. I talked about being observant earlier. Being observant enough to watch people in action is the best way I have found to learn. Sorry about this. To learn what's expected and what's rewarded. So I didn't have one person. I need more water. What I found was I looked up to people that I admired. Who was actually in leadership? Who were others looking to for advice and counsel? Who commanded a room? Who were the people that were driving the most important initiatives? All of those things were what I looked for when I was looking up for people. So it changed. And I find it's actually important for it to change. So you can have people that you admire all the way through, absolutely. But it's also important to watch others as you change your environment, because every culture is different. Success in IBM and success in Silicon Valley are two very different things. So if I just paid attention to what I learned at IBM and I wasn't observant to the different dynamics in Silicon Valley, I wouldn't have been able to make that pivot. So be observant across. Okay. Pardon me. All right, I see a question in chat. I just submitted a question on your website and wondered if it'd be better posted here. Yes, please post questions in the chat. The ones you posted on the website, I only got it if you posted it before about 7 o'clock this morning. So please put it in the chat and I'm happy to address it. Okay. I think I've got my voice back now. Next, how did you find opportunities for advancing? What should I include in the homework? All right, this sounds like somebody who's read my book or listened to me talk, because I talk about homework a lot. Homework, just so everybody understands, homework is basically doing the work to help you understand what's required. So if you have a career goal in mind, then look to see what paths people who are in that career have followed. And let me tell you, that is so much easier now than when I was coming up in my career. LinkedIn, honestly, you can go find anybody's career trajectory on LinkedIn. So go study it. Understand what kinds of roles, what kinds of companies, right? Did they take and did they do? That can help you then map out what you think you should be doing if that's what you aspire to. In addition, go talk to people. Talk to people who have been in some of those roles you see along the path. Oops, excuse me. Along the path. So when you do that, you start to build a profile of the kinds of jobs and opportunities that will give you the skill sets as well as the experience that are valued. For instance, when I was setting out to be a CEO, I just looked at the CEOs. Okay, what were CEOs? What background? What did they do, etc. And that's when I realized that P&L responsibility early in my career was really important. And so I made that a goal and a target. So when it came to how do you find now those kinds of opportunities, you can look in the definitions. I happen to be at a company where I talked to people and tried to understand what jobs, etc. And honestly, it was branch managers there. So I find the best way to learn, frankly, is just to ask. People think asking questions is a weakness. I will tell you, and throughout my career, asking questions has been a strength. Most people are happy to share if asked in the right way. So look at people's career paths, understand the kinds of jobs, find people who've had those kinds of jobs, and reach out and ask questions. And that way you can start to build and understand what you need to do to help you get to the different levels. Okay, I'm moving over to chat now. Hello from Dubai. Thanks for doing this session and having insight. Okay, good. I'm looking for it. Also, do I have any tips or tricks to help manage time better and to keep tasks and meetings on track? Yes. So you got to write it down. You have to write it down. Honestly, I have, in fact, I'll show you. Not the details, but you can see this right here, if you can see it. But that is my notebook. And in my notebook, I literally list everything. And then I have a system. When I put down an action item, I put an open square box. When I complete it, I exit out. If I've made progress, meaning I reached out or I did a step, but it's not done, but I made progress, I just put 1/ through it. If a more follow-up is needed or help is needed, I put a little check mark. I've got a whole system that I created for myself. Bottom line is figure out what works for you. But what I've found is write it down and set deadlines for everything. Everything. Because otherwise, if you just write it down and you flip pages, you're going to forget things. So write it down, set deadlines, and I use Evernote and I use my reminder system. So all of that helps me. So if there's something that I need to do, but I don't need to do it now, then I set it up for a reminder. So it comes back to me in 2 weeks and says, okay, you need to do this now. So the good news is there's so much technology out there that can help you. But that's the biggest. You've got to capture it. No matter how good your memory is, there isn't a person out there that I've met that can keep everything they need to be done when it needs to be done and who it needs to be communicated with and all in their head successfully. And meeting commitments is setting and meeting expectations, if you will, is so important in building your career. So write it down. To keep meetings, one other thing, to keep meetings on track, always have an agenda and have timelines, whether it's written on the agenda or you actually have them in your mind, but set times for each of the different topics on the meeting agenda. Start on time, right? And then end on time. When you do that, people see that you value their time. So all those things are tricks that I use with regards to meetings. Oh, and by the way, starting a meeting on time, The way I get my meetings started on time is through the last person in the room, and that's virtual or physical, has to take notes. And you know what I found? Nobody likes taking notes. So people try to make sure they're not the last person in the room. And that's whether you're on time or not. The last person in the room takes notes. Okay. Let's see. I was turned down for an opportunity after meeting with the CEO twice. I was told it was because I was undereducated and that they would reconsider if I went back to school. Okay. I see the statement, but I don't see a question. So add the question. I'm looking to see. Nope. Okay. Nope. So finish asking the question, then I'm happy to address it. Okay. Let me go back to the questions that were submitted in advance. Okay. How do you make things easier for your boss if you don't know what they're working on? So one of the things I talk about in Unapologetically Ambitious, my book, is the fact that one of my strategies has always been to try to make life easier for my boss. And it's a great question. How do you do that if you don't know what they're working on? Well, number one, you need to know what they're working on. So if they're not telling you, just ask. You know, it's totally fair to ask, hey, what are the top priorities? What are your top priorities for the year, for the quarter, right? However your company operates in terms of business cycles. And then you can do this, by the way, in either one-on-ones that you have or even on staff meetings. You know, when you come together as a group and you're reviewing things, it's totally fair to ask, given all these things we're working on, what do you see as the top 2 priorities? Totally fair. Once you know the priorities, then you need to be observant to figure out, all right, how can I contribute even more beyond what it is that I'm doing? And you can either offer to help, right? Say, hey, I know you're working on this and it's very important. I'd love to be engaged if I can be helpful, right? But the other way to make things easier for your boss is, frankly, for you personally to get done the things that you need to get done, always on time, if not a little before. Because then they're not following up. They're not worried about whether or not you're going to get it done. They learn that they can absolutely count on you. And I find that when bosses believe they can absolutely count on you, you get pulled into more things. So that's the other thing. And then the other is, you know, look for opportunities to be helpful. You know, for instance, let's say there's a big project going on and he's asked multiple people to do multiple things, right? It might be helpful to him or her if you actually figure out either a coordination or maybe you create the template that everybody now uses so it all comes in looking the same way. I mean, there's some simple things that you can do that will also make it easier. But it's really just keeping your eye out for what can I do here that will make things easier, actually in managing me or in the organization itself. Okay, going back to the chat. Let's see. I have a mentor that sits on their board and she felt they were short-sighted and that perhaps I needed to set my sights even higher. I don't know if I should go back or keep building my business. Okay, so I think so. Angelica, in terms of questions, it looks like Angelica is saying, bottom line is there's an opportunity they wanted. CEO said you don't have enough education. Mentor is saying they think the CEO is short-sighted and maybe set sights even higher. Don't know if I need to go back or keep building my business. So on this one, I would take multiple inputs. So right now you have 2. The CEO has said you don't. Your mentor, and I don't know what role or position your mentor has, and therefore I don't know how much weight to put on your mentor, but your mentor says, nope, CEO is being short-sighted. My view is to actually go chat with others. And by the way, when you're looking at this kind of thing, a great resource are people who are actually in executive recruiting. They have a really good sense for what people look for different jobs, what skill sets, what's competitive, etc. So it's perfectly fine to establish those kinds of relationships. And if you're aspiring to the executive level, which I'm assuming so, since you're talking to the CEO, then they should also be interested in you because you're our candidate heading up to the senior levels. So anyways, that's one. I would get more input. It's not enough information for me to actually give you a specific. So get more input to decide whether it's valid or it's not valid. And if it's valid, you need to either fix it or set your sights differently. Okay, next. Greetings from Rwanda. Okay, we've got a full global organization team here today. I have 2 questions. One, what are the top 3 advice to network strategically and successfully as part of achieving career goals. Okay, let me tell you what's worked for me. And frankly, it wasn't a strategy, but I just learned that it actually helped. And that is helping and supporting others. I find that actually by helping other people, it gives them a chance to get to know you in a way that is positive, and therefore gives you a chance to build a relationship. So I try to help people. If you see people, somebody either struggling or someone's got a lot going on, I mean, you can tell when you look at your work environment in terms of what's going on. It's perfectly fine to say, hey, do you need a hand? Or can I help with that? Or if somebody asks a question and you're doing whatever it might be. But I have found that by being helpful, that has opened the door for me to establish relationships in a very genuine way. So that's one. During times of COVID, the normal networking things of grabbing for lunch and doing this, all that stuff's kind of off the table. So the other way I tell people today, since we're all doing everything video conference, is be the first one on the call. So if there's a Zoom or WebEx or Blue Jeans, whatever it might be the first one on, not the last. Why be the first one on? Because that gives you a chance to welcome everybody else into the call. So you're on, somebody else joins in, you see another face. You can say, oh, hi, Susan, we haven't had a chance to meet. I'm blah, 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 blah. It's nice to meet you, right? It gives you a chance. If you're last one on, you have no chance to do that. And if you come in the middle, there's typically already conversations happening and it's hard to bust in. So be the first one. And then you can actually use that to meet people and establish yourself. So those are a couple things. Next, do I have daily habits to help me stay motivated and positive? Yes. So one is exercise. Exercise for me is really important, no matter how little or how much, but doing something to get my body moving is really important to me. And I found that has been very helpful in staying positive. Two is, honestly, when I wake up in the morning, I open my eyes and I wake up and I literally go through in my head all the things that I am thankful for. It's just a really simple thing, but it just reminds you, or, reminds me anyway, so that you don't forget, because it's so easy to think and focus on all the issues and all the problems and all things that aren't working right and everything else. So that just gets me started in the right way. So those are two things. Okay, let me go back to the questions. Keep them coming in the chat, and I will go back to the questions submitted in advance. Okay, so in the book, you speak about leaving IBM when you know you aren't being paid your worth and you have articulated what you want. What tips would you give to others feeling similar, especially in a virtual working world? When do you know the time is up and it's time to change? Okay, so first, don't be quick to give up. All right, yes, I left IBM, but I wasn't quick to give up. I tried for a few years. Okay, so, and why am I saying don't be quick to give up? You've invested time and energy in this company. You've invested time and energy in actually building a network. You've actually established yourself and a reputation in this company. So when you move to a different company, all of that goes to zero, because you're starting all over again. And that actually has value. So don't be quick to leave. One thing happens and you leave. No, try to first, I call it, fight it out. So fight it out just means ask for what you want. See if you can actually get it. Many times people leave and they haven't even fought for themselves. They haven't shared, here's what, whether it's income that you need, whether it's a change in scope of work, whether it's an opportunity, whatever. Give them a chance to tell you no. Don't assume that the answer will be no. So tell them what it is that you need, that you want. Again, very positively. This isn't walking in and saying, okay, if you don't give me a raise, change my responsibilities, and set me up for promotion, I'm leaving. Because your boss will probably say, goodbye, right? That's not the right kind of attitude. The right kind of attitude is when you walk in and you say, I really like this company. I like the team and the organization and what I'm doing, but I'm struggling. I'm struggling because when I look at what my compensation is compared to what I believe the market is, it's just not where I think it should be. So I want to talk to you about how can we fix this? All right, that's a very different approach. You're in essence asking for help. You're not making a demand. So how you ask is also really important, but it's important to ask and have the conversation and get a real answer before making that kind of move. Because bottom line, if you share what you need or the change, etc., and they don't do anything about it and there is not a good and valid reason, then okay, then you have to leave. But listen, when you leave, don't just quit. Find a better opportunity first. I tell people, don't run from an opportunity, run to opportunities. So before you leave, find something that you actually want to do, not as a knee-jerk reaction to the situation that you're leaving. Because otherwise you might find yourself in the exact same position. So do your homework, figure out what it is that you want to go do, right? Go find the right opportunity and then leave. All right, next. How do you shut down your mind to rest? I can't stop thinking about work and serving my purpose in this world. I need rest, but I just can't. Really great question. So first, and I alluded to it earlier with my answer, exercise. Honestly, exercise is the best strategy to getting good rest. Your body is made to work. And it's also made to rest once you work. But if we aren't really working our bodies, then it's a little harder for it to actually rest. And when I say exercise, honestly, I'll walk around the block if that's all you do, but something. But make sure you're getting exercise. And when you're doing that, I think walking is great, by the way, because when you walk, take the time to either, like me, I listen to typically podcasts or a book, or I have a conversation. So I do something while walking, or if I'm really stressed, I try to just walk and pay attention to nature. I look at the trees and the leaves and the stuff growing. I just try to get grounded. So that helps. The other thing you can do is write it down. I find whatever I'm thinking, if I feel like I'm just caught up in my mind about maybe an issue or a problem or a challenge, whatever it might be, I write it down. The aspect of getting it out of my head and onto paper somehow actually relieves some of that stress and pressure. So you can try writing it down. And then the third thing I do is, I do something that actually relaxes me, which for me is listening to music. It can be reading, it can be cooking. So some people meditate. So whatever it is for you that allows your mind to rest, try to do that. And then if none of those things work, then go get some professional help. I talk about it in the book, Unapologetically Ambitious. I've used professional psychologists a couple times in my life. So very few of us are strong enough to deal with everything life throws at us all by ourselves. So if you can't fix it yourself, go get some help. When I was in my 20s, late 20s, I was feeling totally overwhelmed, and I found out I was actually depressed, right? So I couldn't work that through myself, and I went to see a psychologist. When my husband died, I was going through mourning, and I was having a really tough time then as well. I went to a psychologist. So use people. They're professionals for a reason. But don't let yourself stay in that stressed, unable to sleep state. It's not good for your body. It's not good for your health. And ultimately, it's not good for your mind. And it's going to be hard for you to perform personally or professionally at any level of consistency. Okay. Next. I'm just checking the chat. Nope, we're good. Okay. Couple more questions here. How do you convince your superiors that you deserve the promotion amid stiff competition? Okay. Well, first, make sure that you understand what is actually required for this promotion you're looking for. What are the skill sets they're looking for, the experience they're looking for, etc. That's most important. You have to know what it is so that you can communicate what you bring to the table in light of those requirements. So if you don't know what it is, find out. Maybe back to the ask the questions, right? Try to understand. And then make sure that your boss knows what you're doing that actually is consistent with what this job looks for. Also make sure your boss knows you actually want the promotion. I talk to people all the time, and they haven't told anybody. They're just hoping their work will speak for itself. Well, it might, but odds are it won't. So you have to speak for yourself. So number one, let them know you're interested in the promotion. Make sure you're communicating what you're actually doing as it ties to what the job requires. And then ask for their perspective on your competitiveness for the role. I'm aspiring to be the director of engineering. Do you think I'm a good candidate for that job? Just ask the question. But here's what happens. People are afraid of getting a no. So they don't ask the question because, oh my God, what if they say no? That's great if they say no. If they say no, it gives you a chance to understand and ask the question, why not? And when they give you the answer for why not, it gives you the roadmap of what you need to do. So not knowing, ignorance is not bliss in this case. It's much more important to know what is the expectation, what you're not meeting, so that you can go fix it and not let months and quarters and years go by. Okay. Next question. When times are tough, how do you keep yourself motivated and not dwell in the past about things said and done or done? All right. Number one, forgive yourself. Forgive yourself. Many times when we dwell, it's because we're sitting there thinking about, oh my God, I should have done this. And wasn't I a horrible person because I didn't do that? And what about this? And what about that? And we beat ourselves up so much, and it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous because honestly, life is for learning. We are not perfect. We are supposed to make mistakes. As a matter of fact, I used to tell my team all the time, if you're not making mistakes, then you are not pushing yourself hard enough. So you need to make mistakes. The key is not to make the same mistakes and to learn from the mistake, because we don't want failures to define us. It's fine to have failures, but you don't want to be a failure. So what's the difference? Have failure, learn from the failure, right? And then move on so that you're more successful the next time. So let yourself off the hook. Number one, forgive yourself, because everybody fails at things. Everybody does. And then, the other piece is surround yourself with people that are going to build you up. I call them cheerleaders. Cheerleaders are the ones that, by the way, when I say cheerleader, I really mean cheerleader. Rah, rah, go. Yes, you can do it. Come on, right? Because there's so much in this world that is literally tearing us down. You look out there and think, gosh, we're just not good enough because everything we see seems perfect. Okay? No. We need people around us who are going to remind us what's great about us, who will support you and encourage you. So I never would have achieved all the things that I've achieved if I didn't have cheerleaders in my life. And my husband at the time was the biggest one. My late husband, he was my biggest cheerleader. I'll tell you a quick story that I talk about in the book too. But I was in sales early in my career. I don't know, it's probably 5 years into my career or something. And I got this big deal. Big deal. Tens and tens of millions of dollars deal. And not only was it going to make my deal, but it was going to make my number rather. It was going to make my boss's quota and his boss's quota. Everybody's excited. It's going to happen. The order's in. We met with the CEO. Executives have flown in, right? Blah, blah, blah. Well, last minute, the CEO decides, my customer decides they don't want to do the deal. They're going to do something else. Oh my gosh. Not only have I personally failed because I can't make up that kind of number, but I've let down all these people that were counting on it. I felt terrible. And I felt like a failure for a couple of days. I'm like literally moping, and people would say, oh, Shellye, I heard. I might as well have been in mourning. It was terrible. Well, it was my husband. My husband a few days later was like, listen, Shellye, get over it. He said, mourning is over. You are the same person you were 4 days ago before this decision was made. Nothing's changed about you. It was just something that happened. Deal with it, move on, learn from it, and go get another deal. Well, you know what? It's kind of like life in general. You have a failure. Fine, it happened. You can't change the fact it happened. So learn from it, figure out what you'll do differently, but do not let it define you. You are the same person you were before you had the failure. Okay. Next. And we're coming close to the end here. I just have two more. In your book, you wrote that there's no work-life balance. Instead, we should strive for work-life integration. How did you develop the emotional resilience to meet the demands of both work and life? So on this one, I learned that I was important too. And I know this sounds totally ridiculous. Of course you're important, right? But no, most of us, or I won't say most of us, let me talk about me. I was going through life initially, especially early on when I thought I needed to do everything, where I thought everybody else was more important. So I gave everything to my kids and my husband and my job and the community, and people asked for things or asked for help, it's like, yes, because I need to help support everything. Well, I did everything for everybody, but not for me, not for me. And so as a result, I got depressed. I mentioned that earlier. Well, through help of a psychologist, I learned that, you know what, I'm important too. And I need to take self-care and make sure that I'm actually feeding myself. So that's when I learned to do exercise for me. I learned to be grateful. I learned, a number of things, but I learned that I needed to actually do things for me. And that, by the way, that wasn't selfish. It wasn't selfish. It was actually good for me and good for everyone else, because I'm no good to anyone if I'm not the best me. So, first thing is to realize that you are important too, and to put yourself in the priority list when you're making your priorities. Don't leave yourself to the bottom every time, right? So that's one. The second thing I did was I decided what I was willing to be judged on and what I wasn't. Because you know what? The world tries to judge us on everything, on everything. And nobody can possibly live up to being perfect in everything. Nobody is. I'm not. So I got to the point where it's like, I'm going to decide what's important. And I say I, but honestly, my husband and I, we're going to decide what's important. And we're only going to be judged on that. So if judgments came in other areas, I didn't care, because that wasn't something that was important to me. And that also helped me let go so that I could focus. I'll give you a quick example. I talk about also in the book, that's my daughter. My daughter was born with thick curly hair that she had to braid. If it wasn't braided, it was just kind of wild, right? Well, I braided hair my whole life because when I used to have long hair, but I had curly hair. My husband, he was an athlete, 6'2", big guy. He had hands twice the size of mine, braiding little girls' hair. Did he know how to do that? No. Did he need to learn? Yeah. So he had to learn. Well, you know what that meant? While he was learning, she went to school with her hair pretty jacked up. All right, because the braids weren't straight, the part was kind of crooked, things would unravel. I know for a fact, that people, when she went to school, would look at her and say, where is her mother? Right? Where is her mother? Why would they let her out of the house looking like that? Well, you know what? I didn't care. I wasn't willing to be judged on it because that wasn't important to me. She didn't care. She's 4 or 5 years old. They don't care. And Scotty needed to learn. And guess what? In a couple months, he did. And her hair looked great. So decide what you're going to be judged on. Don't let other people decide your priorities for you. All right. Next, what would make my board bio stand out from others? All right. If you're going after a board seat, do the research. Do the research to know what skills boards are looking for. And this isn't hard to find. Accounting firms, headhunting firms, a lot of them put out articles, studies, surveys, all kinds of things. So once you look to see what skills boards are looking for, then compare them to your background and pick 2 or 3 that are reflective in your background and make sure your bio actually highlights those areas. Because for the most part, good boards, they're looking for skills. They're not just saying, oh, we need a good person, all right? What they're saying is, oh, we need somebody who knows M&A, has international experience, and brings technology, right? We're looking for somebody who knows the oil and gas industry and go to market and blah, blah. Typically they pick skill sets that they're looking for. So you want to make sure those skill sets get highlighted in your board bio. All right, looking over here, I'm looking at the chat. What would be your advice to a young person? To the youngest person on the table trying to be fully engaged in online in-person meetings and bring strong contributions. Go into the meeting prepared. Make sure most meetings, good meetings, have agendas. You know what's going to be discussed. So go in prepared so that you know what points you want to make or issues you want to raise or whatever it might be. Use your voice when you have something that's important to say. Don't use your voice just to be heard. Some people speak because they like their voice to be heard. That doesn't add value. You want to make sure that when you open your mouth, you are adding value. You're adding value by asking a good question or by making a good point or whatever. That's how you build a good reputation for being able to be engaged. So it's not quantity at all. It's really quality of what you're saying. The other is if you're having trouble with that, and I've been in situations where I had trouble. I got my first board seat when I was 42, public board seat. And I was pretty young. I was probably the youngest in the room by at least a decade. And for a while there, not only was the only African American, but also the only female. So being heard was challenged. But what I did was I used allies. I looked around the room and I chatted with some of the board members. There was one that I felt, okay, I think I can build a relationship with him. And I did. I built a relationship with him. And then what I did is before a board meeting, I'd reach out to him in advance because we got the materials in advance. And I'd say, Luis, in the next meeting, I'm going to raise this point. Do you think that makes sense? And he would say, yeah, that does make sense. And I said, great. When I say it, will you just amplify it? Because I'm having trouble getting heard. I just put it out there. And you know what? He did. He did. And after a couple times of doing that, I didn't have any problems getting heard. So do your homework, be prepared. Use your voice when it's value add, and then get help and support if you need it to actually be heard. All right. Well, everyone, those are all the questions that I had in chat. Those were all the questions that I got in advance. I thank you so much for joining this Ask Me Anything. Hope you received some information that was helpful. And as I said, feel free to subscribe to the YouTube channel. I do these once a month and happy to talk about anything. If I don't have a perspective or something that I think will be helpful, I'll just tell you that. So I'm very straightforward and direct. You can also feel free to follow me on any of my social media channels, LinkedIn, Instagram, or Facebook. I'm at Shellye Archambeau is my handle, but I try to put out words of inspiration, things that I think might be helpful throughout. And if you haven't, check out my book, Unapologetically Ambitious, where I try to share strategies and approaches for everyone to be able to improve their odds to achieve their aspirations. Thanks again, everybody. Appreciate your time. Bye-bye. Oh, and thanks for your patience through all the coughing.